What's going on, everybody? My name is Colton. Welcome to my 2026 March Madness predictions. Not many things better than a clean, crisp, fresh bracket to go through. We're going to go through every single round from the round of 64 all the way to the national championship. I think this is the third year I've done it on this channel. The past 3 years, I have gotten the national championship right in 2 out of the 3. 3 years ago, I had UConn the year they were the 4 seed. 2 years ago, I had Creighton. They lost in the Sweet 16. That was kind of rough. And then last year, I bounced back with the Florida Gators, who I really liked, and of course, my guy Walter Clayton. So that was fun. Trying to keep up that reputation, although I will say this year, I am borderline losing sleep over this one. It is a tough bracket and a tough national championship to predict, but we're going to try. We're going to go through every single matchup, so let's get right into it. And we start in the East with Duke and Siena. Duke has some injury news, of course, but we're going to roll Duke through. Spoiler alert, I'm not taking any of the 16 seeds this year. I don't think anything crazy is going to happen there. Ohio State and TCU, on the other hand, is one of the toughest games of the entire first round to predict, and of course they have it first up on Thursday. I've been back and forth on this one more than any other game. I was on Ohio State, or at least I thought I was going to be on Ohio State, but I made the change to TCU. And it's like Jamie Dixon. I think David Punch can keep them in this game. I think everybody's on Ohio State, it feels like. And for good reason. Bruce Thornton is a great player. Ohio State is very talented. And the way I follow college basketball throughout the year is much heavier towards March. The beginning of the year, I'm so locked into the NFL that I'm following it through the whole year. I know how the teams are doing, but I don't know the X factors and the nitty gritty until we get closer to March in the conference tournaments. So I definitely want to put that out there. So I don't want to fall in love with the teams that just looked good in the conference tournaments, although admittedly I probably will fall into that trap a few times in this video. But I'm going to go TCU here. They had an up and down season. They had the opening loss to New Orleans, I believe, and then they had this game against Notre Dame, which I just needed TCU money line in a 14 parlay or something like that, and they were 7.5 point favorites, and they lost in overtime. So they have some bad losses, but they also have some good wins, and they're a team that's always scrappy. I remember a few years ago when they almost beat Arizona when they were the 1 seed. So I like TCU. I think they're going to get it done here against a more popular pick in Ohio State. I'm fully aware that this could be an 0-1 start to start the entire bracket, but we're going to roll TCU. I almost got crazy right off the bat and took Northern Iowa, but I'm going to take St. John's. I'm still not a huge believer in St. John's. I still have that vibe from last year when they lost in the second round. They're still not an elite offensive team. Zuby Ejiofor is great. They have Hopkins. They have talent for sure, and they're led by a Hall of Fame coach. So I will give them that benefit of the doubt and get them out of the round of 64 against Northern Iowa. Although I think Northern Iowa is plus 10.5. I would definitely lean towards that. I think they can make this game kind of scrappy, ugly, and end up hanging within that number. Kansas and Cal Baptist. I know Cal Baptist has a really good lead scorer, but I think Kansas is just too good. I know they've had Darren Peterson problems throughout this entire season, but I still think they're talent with Melvin Council, Bill Self at the helm. This is another team, this region has so many Hall of Fame coaches, and I just think Kansas will find a way to beat Cal Baptist. First time in the tournament for them, shout out. Louisville and South Florida, this is the other game I was back and forth on, probably more than any other. I'm going to take South Florida. I was on Louisville most of the way because I thought this was too much of a trap pick. I thought everybody and their mother seemed to be on South Florida here. But Michael Brown's in doubt. Isaiah Nelson and Wes Ennis are really good players for South Florida. They have the makings of one of those mid-major teams that isn't afraid of anybody, that will play a power team and not be intimidated at all. So I'm going to take South Florida to get the upset in the first round. Also, a game that's in that early pot of games on Thursday, which sucks because TCU, Ohio State, and Louisville, South Florida are 2 games that I really feel could go either way. So it could get shaky early, let's just say that. Michigan State and North Dakota State, not a whole lot to say here. I think Michigan State rolls through. UCLA, UCF, out of all these 7-10s, 8-9s, I've been so confident in UCLA that it's almost making me a little scared that UCF's going to pull some shit here, but I'm going to take the Bruins. UCLA has one of my favorite teams of all time several years ago with Johnny Juzang and Jaime Jaquez, Ty Campbell. I always like UCLA. I don't necessarily think they're that team this year, but I do think they're getting hot at the right time. Donovan Dent is a baller, so if they can get fully healthy and stay healthy, I think they do have the ability to make a run. And then UConn and Furman. I know Furman had the upset a few years ago against Virginia. This is not as good of a Furman team. That Furman team was a 13 seed. I will take UConn to get past the Paladins. Then we got Florida against the winner tonight. I'm recording this on Wednesday, so Prairie View, A&M, and Lehigh. I'll take Florida either way there. Clemson and Iowa. Kind of an ugly game. I think it's just the Bennett Starts show, and I think Iowa will lean on that to get the win. Clemson, of course, lost last year as a 5 seed, I believe it was, against McNeese. So I always am a little hesitant with Clemson in the tournament. I know they had the Elite 8 run, I believe, a couple years ago, but I don't know. Last year kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. So I'm going to take Iowa. I know it's not the same team and everything, but I'm going to take the team that has the best player on the floor, and that is the Hawkeyes. Vanderbilt and McNeese, those McNeese Cowboys, I feel like this is a worse version of their team last year. Not that I'm an expert on McNeese basketball, but it just kind of feels that way. And Vanderbilt, I think is a very strong 5 seed, so I will put them through to the round of 32. Nebraska-Troy, another game that I kind of toyed back and forth with. Nebraska being the only power school to not have a tournament win. I think they get that off their back here, and they beat Troy, although Troy is kind of sneaky. They're not very high on KenPom. It ultimately led me away from the Trojans, but they do feel like a team that, made it last year, has some of that leadership back, and is ready to make a run this year, make a little Cinderella run, but I think the Cornhuskers are the better team. North Carolina and VCU, another one that kind of feels like South Florida, kind of feels like a trap for people, hunting for upsets. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to take VCU. I think they're a program that's always a threat to power schools, and UNC does have the big injury to Caleb Wilson. So, they haven't fallen off a cliff, UNC, but I do feel like this is a tough spot, and the line reflects that. I think they're a 2.5-point favorite. Illinois and Penn, I think this could have been more interesting if it were to be Yale. Penn, of course, played a great game, beat Yale in the Ivy League final. I'm going to take Illinois to rout the Quakers. St. Mary's and Texas A&M. This is a tough one. Buckyball in the power school now. I had Samford, I think it was last year, against Kansas. This year, I'm not going to go with that style. I think St. Mary's is a great suffocating defense. Randy Bennett has had a ton of tournament experience. They don't always have a ton of success, but they are good for a round 1 victory sometimes, and I'll take the Gales to do just that against A&M. And then Houston, Idaho, I'll take Houston to get past the Big Sky winners in Idaho. All right, up to the top right now, we got Arizona and Long Island. Long Island, very fun story. I will take Arizona, though. Villanova, Utah State. Not super familiar with Utah State, but I am going to take them because Villanova just seems like such a middle-of-the-pack team. I don't think they're that dynamic in any area. In the Big East tournament, they didn't look great. They have some shaky losses. They haven't had any big-time wins, I don't believe. I know they beat Wisconsin, I believe, earlier in the year, but other than that, they're just kind of this isn't the 2010s version of Villanova, but it is good to see them back in the big dance. Wisconsin, High Point, another one that I'm not falling to the trap here because I love Wisconsin. Again, I just talked about earlier about falling in love with teams in the conference tournament. Well, that was Wisconsin for me. I always like Wisconsin anyway, but Nick Boyd and John Blackwell putting on a show in March I think will be very fun. I think they get past a High Point team, which is actually a lot lower rated than you'd think. I know they're kind of a popular 12 over 5 as they were last year, but I think last year they were a 13. Regardless, I don't think they are going to get it done here. I think Wisconsin has too much. Arkansas and Hawaii, another team that I think a lot of people were trying to pick in Hawaii, but they got a terrible matchup here against Darius Acuff and Arkansas. I know a lot of people have been talking about the whole no-switch defense in Hawaii. I don't really know how that works when you play such an elite team, an elite guard that Arkansas has. BYU against Texas, who beat NC State last night. I think a lot of people are down on BYU, with no Richie Saunders, but they still have AJ DeMonsa. I'm going to take BYU. I still think this is a team that could make a run. I know it's a little dangerous to take BYU, and it feels like any tournament. I still think they have the best player on the floor pretty much regardless of the game they play, so I'm going to take them in the first round here. Gonzaga, Kennesaw State. Kennesaw State kind of snuck up. They weren't even one of the best teams in their conference, I don't think. So I'm going to take Gonzaga to roll against the Owls. Miami and Missouri. This is the last game of the first round. A tough one. But I am going to trust Renew, Trey Donaldson to get it done against the Missouri Tigers, who are playing a de facto home game in St. Louis. So that'll be interesting. But I do think Miami's the better team. Purdue and Queens. Queens wants to play fast, I'm pretty sure, and that's a terrible recipe against Purdue. I think Purdue routs them. Michigan and Howard. I will take Michigan. Howard just beat UMBC last night. I kind of thought UMBC would take that one, but Howard looked pretty good, but they will run into a buzzsaw in Michigan. Georgia and St. Louis. I'm taking all 9 seeds. I like Robbie Avila. I think he was robbed a few years ago, or last year, 2 years ago, whatever it was, with Indiana State. He gets to put on a little show in the first round. I think they beat Georgia. Georgia, I know it's not the same team year to year, but looked really bad last year against Gonzaga in the first round. So I'm going to go with the Billikens, take a stab with them. Texas Tech and Akron, another one that in years past I feel like I would completely fall for this and take Akron, but I'm not going to. Texas Tech, the narrative is the injury, JT Toppin not being there. I still think this is a good team. Don't fall into the trap. I'm going to take Texas Tech. Alabama and Hofstra. Alabama just had Holloway arrested. If you would have closed your eyes and I said a player just got arrested before the tournament started, what school am I talking about? You'd probably guess Alabama. I feel like this happens all the time with them. I'm going to take Hofstra. I think Hofstra has good leadership. Speedy Claxton at coach. Good guard play. I think they're top 100 in KenPom on both offense and defense, if I'm not mistaken. I think they have the makings of a team that, especially if Alabama goes a little cold for a stretch, that they can capitalize. You got to take a shot somewhere. I'm going to take it with the Hofstra pride. Tennessee versus the winner of tonight's game in Miami of Ohio and SMU. Miami of Ohio, of course, being the talk of the nation this year in college basketball. I'm going to take Tennessee to beat either one of those teams. I think the Redhawks have a shot tonight against SMU, but I think Tennessee, a little more under the radar Tennessee team this year, I think gets it done. Virginia and Wright State, similar to Wisconsin. Kind of in love with Virginia right now, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to take the Cavs back in the NCAA tournament. They haven't won a tournament game since they won the national championship. I think they get it done against the Horizon League winner. It wasn't a great conference to begin with. Kentucky and Santa Clara. Kentucky spends $1 trillion on their roster. I think they lose right away to Santa Clara. They got size, good shooting. Always a little weary because, West Coast Conference doesn't have a ton of big-name schools that you can really, demonstrate your talent outside of Gonzaga and St. Mary's. But I think it is a team that's not going to be intimidated, and Kentucky has been struggling. And then we got Iowa State and Tennessee State. Shout out to Tennessee State, but I think Iowa State handles business. Whew. All right. Through to the second round, we got Duke and TCU. This is where my concerns about TCU kind of reach a point where I can't take them. I'll take Duke. But TCU... this could kind of be like a game from several years ago now with Zion Williamson when they played UCF in Taco Fall that year, I believe. I believe that was the round of 32, and Duke had it come down to the wire. I think TCU could kind of push this Duke team similar to that story several years ago, but I do think Duke, in a similar fashion, gets it done late, and I think that goes for either TCU or Ohio State. Whoever comes out of that game, I think, could push Duke. I don't think this is a good draw for Duke, but I do think they get through it. St. John's and Kansas, again, I kind of foreshadowed it. I'm not a huge St. John's fan. I'm going to take Kansas. I think they still have the more talented team. Whether they show up or not is another story, but I will back them to put their best foot forward and get to a matchup with Duke. South Florida, Michigan State, I think this is where that magic runs out for South Florida, although I think they could keep it close for a while. And then UCLA and UConn, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take UCLA. I think UConn is not as formidable as they have been in years past. They still have Alex Caravan, solo ball, ton of talent, Dan Hurley. This would be a fascinating coaching matchup. I think the refs would need Tylenol, Advil. They're going to be harassed in this game, but I think it'll be a good one. I think it'll be close, but I think UCLA, they don't do anything fantastic defensively. They might not overwhelm you on the eye test, but I do think they just can get hot, and they're playing better basketball now. So I'm going to take the Bruins through to the Sweet 16. There's going to be somebody in this region that you don't fully expect. Florida and Iowa, I think that's when the Bennett Sturt show runs out. I'll take the Gators. Vanderbilt and Nebraska. This would be a really good matchup. I think Vanderbilt's just the overall better team. Nebraska had the 20-0 start, but they've kind of slowly teetered off since then. VCU and Illinois. I'll take Illinois. Illinois is a really good team. They have a lot of talent and size, so I'll take the Fighting Illini to get past the VCU Rams. And then St. Mary's Houston, kind of a clash of defensive teams. I know Houston's not as dominant as they have been in recent seasons on that end of the floor, but I am going to take Houston to get past the Gales and set up a matchup with Illinois. Arizona, Utah State, I'll take Arizona. Not much to say there. Wisconsin, Arkansas could be, I'm not the first person to say this very clearly, but one of the games of the tournament. Great guard play. Could be a high scoring game. I'm going to take Wisconsin. I think a lot of people are thinking Arkansas is a sneaky Final Four team, and I don't fully disagree with that sentiment, but I like the Badgers. I think this is a close matchup. I'll take Wisconsin to get it done. BYU Gonzaga, I know a lot of people have quit BYU, but they'll have the best player on the floor. Gonzaga might not have Huff. They'll have Graham Ike, but I think BYU can get it done. I'm going to take the Cougars through, and then that'll set up a matchup with Purdue, who I think escapes a tough one against Miami. Michigan St. Louis, won't waste your time here. I'll take Michigan. Texas Tech and Hofstra, I will take Texas Tech. This is dangerous because this little portion of the region of the bracket, Texas Tech, Akron, Alabama, Hofstra, I really feel like I could have it completely backwards. It could be Alabama, Akron, and then my Texas Tech to the Sweet 16 pick falls apart completely. But I still think they're the best team here out of this pod, so I'm going to take Texas Tech and just hope that the injury of JT Toppin doesn't come back to haunt them too much. Tennessee and Virginia, I think Tennessee can match up pretty well with Virginia. They're two more defensive-focused teams, but Virginia's not the previous Virginia teams. They have some real talent on this offense. DeRitter, they got multiple 7-footers. This is a team that has a lot of talent. I'm going to take Virginia. I think they're kind of being slept on. And then Santa Clara, Iowa State, I will take the Cyclones to get past the Broncos. All right, Sweet 16, this is where it gets tough now. The entire thing is tough. But I'm going to take Duke over Kansas and UCLA over Michigan State, setting up a Duke and UCLA blue blood battle. It'll be a blue blood battle regardless if it's these four. Again, Duke's concerns me because of the injuries. Caleb Foster wouldn't be back until the Final Four, I believe they said. And UCLA scares me at the same time just because, again, eye test, they don't always pass it. I feel like they go through stretches where they don't look great. But again, the Big Ten tournament, they looked pretty good, and if they were fully healthy, maybe they would have beat Purdue. So I'm going to take UCLA to surprise some people, get through to play Duke. And then I think I'm not going to overthink this one. Florida-Houston, rematch of last year's national championship. I think we get it, and I think Houston will be out for blood in that one. Back up top right, Arizona-Wisconsin. I think this is a thrilling game. If Wisconsin was at any other part of the bracket, I might take them further, but I will take Arizona. At some point, Arizona, just has too much talent. Bradley, Burries, Grivas, Pete, Karchenkov can shoot the lights out of the ball. They aren't a dominant three-point shooting team. I think that's the big flaw with Arizona, but I don't think they necessarily need it with how great their defense is and how efficient they are overall. And then BYU Purdue, this is where I will take Purdue. Purdue was, I think, ranked, 1 coming into the year. I think we kind of see Purdue show up. Now, they are potentially baiting you with the whole Big Ten tournament run, but I do think they'll have some success this March and get to an Elite Eight. Michigan and Texas Tech, this is where I will safely get off the Texas Tech train there. And then Virginia, Iowa State. Iowa State cannot shoot free throws, which always concerns me in March Madness. Tight games, it's going to come down to free throw shooting sometimes. I'm going to take Virginia. I don't think this is a particularly popular pick, but I think they have the talent to get past anybody in this bottom half, and maybe even Michigan. We'll get there in a moment. Duke, UCLA, as much as I want to take UCLA to the Final Four and really separate myself from what the large bracket pools will be, I don't really think they can do it against Duke. Maybe they can, but they're just very susceptible along this path to bow out to UConn, to bow out to Michigan State. Heck, if they lose to UCF, I could be screwed. So I will take Duke, hedge my bets a little bit there, and have Duke return to the Final Four. And then Florida and Houston, I think Houston gets the revenge on Florida. This Florida team is still really good. They have Alex Condon, Chenyolu, but they don't have that elite guard play that they had last year. Walter Clayton Jr. is not walking through that door, and I think Houston is just, this is a team that returns Uzan, Tugler, Sharp. They have a lot of veteran leadership that really wants this for Kelvin Sampson. And then they got Kingston Flemings, who is an outstanding freshman as well. This is a really good basketball team, and I think they can get to a Final Four again. Arizona-Purdue, I think this is where it ends for Purdue, and I think the defensive lapses will show up here, and I think Arizona will get to Indianapolis. Michigan, Virginia, this is where I'm going to throw an absolute dart at the board. I'm going to take Virginia. Again, the size that Virginia has can kind of match up with Michigan. Michigan has the LJ Kaysen injury. I understand they're still a elite team all the way around, but I think if there's a dart to be thrown at the board here, it might as well be with either Virginia, UCLA, Wisconsin, one of those teams, and I'm going to take it with Virginia here. So that sets up a Final Four, not incredibly upset heavy. Duke, Houston, a 1 and a 2, and then a 1 and a 3 with Arizona, Virginia. So that's a seed total of just 7, so nothing crazy, but I do think Virginia gives me a little bit of an edge if they can get through somehow. And I think they can. So I'm going to take Houston and Arizona to match up in an all Big 12 national championship game. And I think Arizona breaks the West Coast drought. And I think they beat Houston in like 80-68 maybe. We'll say 148 points. Call it that. So there you have it. I'm going with the Arizona Wildcats. Do I feel as good about that as I did with Florida last year, UConn 3 years ago? Heck, even I felt better probably about Creighton 2 years ago. I don't feel great about it, but I think that might be a good thing. I think sometimes when you feel overconfident, it can unravel quickly. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. Be sure to leave your picks in the comments below. Drop a like and subscribe if you are new. Go check out the Scream rankings video. That video is getting some interaction. I like hearing a lot of the Scream rankings if you're a fan of that franchise. I know we do sports, movies, and a lot of other things on this channel. So go check that out. And I will see you guys all very, very soon. Later.